Yo, what is good, everybody? This is Joey from Heart Pirates TCG here. Sorry, it's been a while since I posted. Just been going through some stuff like normal. I will say, if you guys don't see me post for like 7 days or more, it's because like my bipolar kicked in and I'm just going through a hard time, and I'll bounce back eventually whenever the chemicals in my brain try to rebalance themselves. But what I have for you today is this Lucci list that I think is a lot different than the other Lucci lists, and that's because it's optimized to try to not auto lose into Black Yellow Luffy, and I think I did actually hit that goal, on top of also having a little bit of a better matchup spread into green. Now I will say Black Yellow Luffy is still favored. There's nothing you can do with this deck that will not make it just inherently die to Black Yellow Luffy, but you can make it, instead of a 90-10, you can make it like a 65-35, I would say, at best, which in my opinion is much better, especially when you're going into a 10-round tournament. You're probably going to play 1 or 2 Black Yellow Luffys, and if you can win one of those, you know, because they either misplay or you play perfectly and, you know, see the cards you need to see because you have tech options into it, then that is going to help you get, you know, into the top 64, maybe even your, you know, a serial card, which I think that this deck is going to, whoever plays this deck is going to have a lot of serial cards. Like, if you're good with Lucci, you're going to run into a lot of situations where like you can just beat every single matchup because your deck has a lot of answers for what the meta entails. So let me go over this list real quick, and then I'll talk to you about why I made those decisions. But I will say, if you guys are looking to get a full guide on this deck, I've been playing it for the past like week and a half, like hardcore testing it against some really good players, and this is the list that I came up with. Now, like I said, is a little bit different. I'll explain that in a second, but you can go on Patreon to see that. I also posted the Doflamingo and the Bonney guide on that as well. Yeah, you'll see that on Patreon. So the second tier for 8 doll hairs is going to get you access to the Lucci list, which is going to come out on Wednesday, and then the other, you know, guides that I've already done for all of the leaders that can realistically get a top 64. So that being said, let's talk about the list. So we have one Spandine. This is not the engine of the deck. I really don't think it's that great. Like, don't get me wrong, it's great, but it's not very, very important for you to actually see. There have been dozens of games I've won with this deck without seeing this at all, and when you see it, it's great, but a lot of times even when you have it in the trash, you don't even want to use it, because basically that whole combo where you play Gecko into Rebecca into Helmeppo and then Spandine and Lucci is like you have to have like nothing on the board, or like a bunch of like weaklings on the board you're okay with sacrificing. And for me, it's just not realistically worth it, because like, I'm not sure, it just doesn't feel like you're winning in that situation, because you basically have nothing on the board. And if you get this, that's great, but like you don't really, I'm gonna stop saying like so much, guys. Someone told me that, and I'm gonna try to work on it, right? But simply put, you don't need to see this card to win the game, and a lot of times if you do see it, you don't even need to play it, and sometimes it's just better to go Helmeppo into Lucci, you know, because you already have a board that you already don't feel like sacrificing. Then we're playing 3 Brook of, you know, Baby Brook not only is a 1k counter, but, you know, in combination with cards like Helmeppo or Stage or Tempest Kick plus Leader can kill a bunch of stuff. You know, with just the Stage, Brook can KO a 4 cost on play. And if he stays on the board, then he's KOing a 4 cost every single turn, or higher, obviously, if you have, you know, cost reduction with, you know, Khalifa or Helmeppo, or like I said, like Tempest Kick or something like that, which is just massive. Right, which is really good. So we're playing a total of 10 2Ks. We're playing 4 Khalifa, we're playing 4 Kaku, we're playing 2 of the Bartolomeo. I value the recyclability of these 2Ks more than I value like some cost reduction. Realistically, you could replace the 2 Barts with like 2 Surus or 2 Tashigis. And you're not wrong for that at all, in my opinion. But like, there's a lot of times where I needed to have blockers against things like Black Yellow Luffy, and I wasn't able to find it because this deck doesn't really have a lot of room for, sorry, my dog was like panting, I thought something was wrong. This deck doesn't have a lot of room for some of these cards, right? So like, it doesn't have room for Borsalino, right? It doesn't have room for, you know, some other blockers that you really need, and all we're doing is relying on Rebecca and Sabo, which are not searchable. You know, nothing is searchable, no blockers are searchable in this deck. So you just realistically just need to have some type of ability to find blockers later on in the game, and sometimes Rebecca is what you need to find like a Sabo, or if you don't have the Dawn, let's say you need to play a Brook that turn, then you can go Rebecca, you know, play Brook from hand, and then, you know, play Bartolomeo. You know what I'm saying? Like that's obviously like a huge thing. Or I guess you can just kind of do that with and still play Sabo if you use Rebecca to get back a 2K, or I'm sorry, the Brook. Either way, if you had to hard play the Brook and then Rebecca get back a, you know, a Bartolomeo from the trash, then you can still have recyclable 2Ks, which is really nice. Also, it's a blocker, like I said, and you can protect that off Sabo if you really need to, like on an 8 Dawn turn. They were only playing 3 Lucci because this card really clogs in your hand, and this deck plays a lot of dead cards. So I think this deck plays a total of like 22 dead cards. So you definitely, not only is it searchable, but like you don't need to see it all the time, and sometimes it's just better in your trash. So you don't need to play 4 of them. It is nice. It is nice when you see them on curve, but sometimes you don't even want to use them on curve because your trash isn't there yet, and you want to kind of make room for the Tempest kick. Then we have 4 Gecko Morias, obviously, but then we're playing 4 Brook. So Brook actually replaced the Kaku in this deck, the 5 cost Kaku. Now, 5 cost Kaku is good because it is a 1K counter that on curve does kind of take care of a lot of like things, especially with leader and NES lobby. But what I was finding is sometimes I didn't have any CP cards in the trash to actually be able to, you know, use Kaku's effect on curve. And then also because I needed to fit Brook in here and I wanted to fit a little bit more defense with like Rebecca, you know, and the Sabos, as well as like the 3 cost Brook, I was finding that I didn't have a whole lot of room to be able to fit the Brooks in there. And so I had to find a card to cut. And it was a very similar stat line, you know, like one's a 5/6, one's a 6/6, and one's a counter, one isn't, which does suck. But this has a lot more answers into the meta, right? So like if you're playing against like any deck that plays Borsellino or Sabo, or just anything for that matter, like this can like trash a 4 or less, right? Which is huge. It's absolutely huge. Also in the mirror match, if they don't have anything to trash, like if they don't have, like if you kill it by battle or something like that, you can make them put stuff in their like from their trash to the bottom of their deck, and then kind of turn off their Tempest kick at least for a little bit, or you know, put back their Helmeppo, or put back their Spandine or something like that. Like it's massive. Also it's really good for supplementary. It's good into Black Yellow Luffy because it's a supplementary card that can help you like realistically win a game. So for example, if they're at 0 life and a 9K leader, and you have a Gecko or a Sabo out on the board, and you have 10 down, obviously, then what's going to happen is you can just hard play Brook after you like attack into their, you know, their life for 5K with like a Lucci, something to cost reduce basically the Sabo down to 4 cost, either stage or, you know, leader effect, and then you trash it with the Brook, and then you put the rest of your 4 Dawn on the Gecko or the Sabo and swing 13 into their life. And while it might not kill them, it's going to take 3 cards out of their hand, and you're establishing a 6K body. And against Black Yellow Luffy, they realistically, once they start kind of trying to like loop Sabo, Baxter, stop it. Sorry. He's been biting himself recently, and I put like medication on his tail, but I love you, buddy. Anyway, Black Yellow Luffy doesn't realistically have a whole lot of cards once they start looping Sabo, because they're playing basically, they're using basically 2 per turn, right? Because they're playing Gecko, and then they're using their leader effect to trash a card, which is -2 already. And then obviously if you're, you know, establishing bodies on the board and attacking them at the right times, they're also discarding cards, and they're only gonna have there's only gonna have a few turns where they can realistically play the Gecko and just not instantly lose. So I hope that makes sense. Like I said, the full guide's gonna be on Patreon, so I'm gonna explain it a little bit better there. And then, like I said, we're playing the 4 Kaku. The 2 Sabo is really important because this deck can lose really hard. Sometimes to Law if you don't like kind of control their board early, but sometimes you can do like a thing where sometimes you don't see stage, but you can kind of contain their board a little bit with like an early Lucci play, or like an early like Brook, and then they can't get Brook off the board for whatever reason, or they choose not to get it off the board to establish a board, and you can kind of go 50-50 with their board and kind of control it a little bit. And then you can get to 8 Dawn where they only have like 3 characters on the board, and then you can pop 2 of them with Sabo, and then basically they don't normally have answers for Sabo, and even if they do, that's a lot of cards out of their hand. It's at least 2 Gordons, and then whatever they play off their leader effects, that's 3 cards in hand, and you can kind of start controlling the board from that aspect right there. Especially since you're a 5 life leader, you can realistically, you know, be in situations like that a lot. And the Sabo is just much better than Stussy because 1, you can play it on curve on your 8 Dawn turn, and then 2, you're killing 2 things, which one of them is a kid, and one of them is probably going to be you know, like Kid Killer or Reiju or just any 5 cost character, and you know, you establish a body that is really tough for them to actually get off the board. So that's why I think Sabo is better, because it just gives you another answer, because we mill so much that if we don't see Gecko, then sometimes we see Sabo, and then either one of them in that situation on 8 Dawn is perfectly fine to be able to control the board, to be able to stabilize into, you know, aggro decks. We're playing 2 Helmeppo because I think Helmeppo is just so much better into like the variety of decks, so it's more important than Spandine. Also, you could just hard play it from hand. And sorry, I keep looking to make sure Baxter's not scratching himself. But you can like hard play him from hand, and then you can basically like play Brook, or you can play Lucci, or, you know, the baby Brook, or whatever it is, and it's just really good all the time, where it's like there's almost no play that I can make, like big play that I can make without Helmeppo, where I can make plenty of big plays without Spandine. So that's why we're playing 2 Helmeppo and 1 Spandine, but realistically you can cut it down to 1 if you really want to. Then we're playing the finger gun because Bonney is really annoying, and the Hawkins is almost unkillable if you don't play the finger gun. And basically we just need an answer for Hawkins, because we can kill everything else except for Hawkins, right? But if we let Hawkins stick to the board and they get another Hawkins, then we're just taking 2 7s every single turn, and eventually we're just going to lose. And then for us to even try to contest, like, it's almost impossible for us to contest their Hawkins, because 1, they can rest one of our characters, and 2, they can just like it's a 7k character, so like the threshold you have to meet to make it hard for them to counter out of is like an 11k attack. And then that's pretty much your whole turn. So like if you can just have this ready to kill the Hawkins on curve, then you can basically just win that matchup pretty freely, I would say, because that's the only card you're realistically worried about. Maybe like a 8-cost kid with like Rosinante, but even then that's not really like a huge like concern for us, honestly, especially since we're playing Brook and we can just trash it. And it's searchable too, which is nice. So then we're playing 1 King Pistol because 1, it's searchable, and 2, we play a lot of dead cards in this deck. 4 Tempest Kick, and then 3 Stage. You could play 4 Stage if you want to, because it's not searchable and it is really important and a cornerstone of the deck. But 3 I've been seeing it enough where I think 4 might clog. I'm not entirely sure though. But yeah, that's the deck list, guys, and let me show you guys the gameplay now. All right, so I will say just to let you guys know that some of the lists that you'll play against Black Yellow Luffy are not optimized to beat Black for whatever reason, because they're inherently already beat Black because of Sabo. So if you run into the list, like there's a list apparently that this guy was playing at first that didn't play Baby Sabo, which I thought was crazy, but apparently that's a list that topped in Japan. I think that's absolutely nuts. And if you don't play Baby Sabo, this deck has like a favorable matchup into Black Yellow Luffy, this deck in particular. But I will say that, you know, if you do see the cards you need to see, like a Gecko or like what is it called, like a Sabo early, and then you can combo that with Brook, I feel like you have a very, very, very favored matchup into this deck. Just depending on the deck list that the Black Yellow Luffy plays, because they can play a lot of like tech stuff, honestly. But the trick to beating this deck is to leave them at 2 life and make it really weird for them to be able to use their leader effect consistently without using a bunch of dead cards from their, or I'm sorry, without using a bunch of 2Ks from their hand to take their own life. And that is the best way to honestly beat them. And you're basically treating them like you treat an L, is you keep your board stacked. You keep building up characters that can realistically attack into them, and then once they're at like, you know, a point where, you know, you can punish them by taking a bunch of cards out of their hand, that's what you do. And then you take a bunch of cards out of their hand and then establish a big character, or just straight up kill them. So 5k into life, I go ahead and take that because I don't really have a lot of plays next turn, and I was kind of looking for something to play, and I wanted to bait him into going a Ace and not a Sabo here, because Ace would have been a little bit too aggressive, and then he wasn't developing like a board. Plus I can kill the Ace with what is it called, with the Gecko the next turn, but wasn't in the cards. I go ahead and play Rebecca, and I play a Spandine, and then I think I get a Tempest Kick, and then Rebecca gets a Brook. The reason Rebecca gets a Brook is because, like I said, this is a very supplementary card towards Gecko, where if I can keep trashing his Sabos and swinging into his life, as well as establishing a 6k character, I can realistically put in a lot of work and basically put him in a position where he just straight up like dies sometimes, because he has to establish a bunch of, you know, bodies every single turn. If he doesn't do that, he's kind of cooked. So he's going to swing 8 into life, and I'm going to block with the Rebecca. Then he's going to play Rocket Boots Luffy, and then he's going to pop the Brook, the baby Brook right here. And I am going to do, I forget what I'm going to do here. I think I'm going to play Brook and then just, yeah, I'm going to play Brook, and then I'm going to play just Lucci and then not KO anything, I don't think. And I'm going to use my leader effect, or I'm going to swing into his life, because I want him to be at 1 whenever I go ahead and develop this board. and that way he can't go Gecko basically into his leader effect. So he has to choose between playing Gecko or using his leader effect. And if he chooses the wrong one, then I can basically just completely just kill him or completely like tax his hand. It's kind of hard to explain in this like short video, but I'm gonna do my best to explain it in the guide, or I will explain it better in the guide because I have a lot more time to do that on Patreon, because the video is gonna be like an hour or maybe even like 2 hours long. There's a lot to talk about with this deck, unlike other decks. But yeah, so you put him in this weird position right here where like, look, he has to play a Flampe to basically, he has to play a Flampe to like start getting cards out of his hand. Or, I'm sorry, cards from his life. And then he basically just dies right here. He doesn't establish a blocker, and then he's like, oh, shit. So I swing 9 into him, and if he takes it, then I'm just going like 13, 7, 7, 7, and just completely taxing his hand. But then he dies either way, because I swing 9 into him, and then I swing 7, and then he's just dead, guys. So that is the first video. I'm gonna only show you guys one more, and then like I said, the guide will be posted on Patreon if you guys are interested in that. But yeah, let's go on to the next game. But yeah, guys, let me just reiterate real quick. Against Black Yellow Luffy, the best thing that you can do is leave them at 2 life or 1 life, and then develop a board of characters that can realistically put in a lot of work against Black Yellow Luffy, and then try your best to just keep your Sabos, or keep I'm sorry, not your Sabos, your life a little bit high, and then also keep Brooks in your hand to be able to once you get a 9k character out on the board, your Brooks can basically just their sole job is to kill Sabo, and then basically take a bunch of cards out of their hand from that point on. So looks like he plays the Kuzan here. I do like the Kuzan build myself. I think it's really interesting because this deck can easily get to 10 Dawn, especially because you're scared to attack into his life. So realistically, he'll be at 2 life by the time he drops Kuzan, and if you don't have an answer for it, you're kind of cooked. But I go ahead and play a Rebecca because I have 3 2Ks in hand. I get back a Lucci. Because I wanted to have a play for next turn, especially because since I have stage, and then I could realistically have the Brook next turn as well, depending on the situation. And I needed a play to kill something the next turn if he didn't play Sabo, which is why I played the Lucci right there, or I took the Lucci because with stage plus leader I can kill a 5k character, plus I can kill his Garp, which is really nice. He goes ahead and plays a Hiyori. Hiyori puts a Luffy on his life, and then Luffy gets Rocket Boots Luffy, Rocket Boots KOs Rebecca. And then he's going to swing 4 into the Brook. And because I don't want to go down too early, I go ahead and discard a 2k here and force him to attack into the Brook with my with his leader. And it's basically turned into a pseudo blocker. Like, it took basically like a big hit right there. And like I said, you don't want to go down too early against Luffy because they can just aggro you out of the game with, you know, Rush Ace. And then, you know, their leader is going to be like swinging 11k. And then they have Gecko swinging 9k. So it's just really scary sometimes, especially like they're like Luffy that can take its own life and then be an 8k character. That's massive. That's massive. And we don't want to take, like, we want to use our life as a buffer against those attacks right there, which is why we were basically using Brook as like a pseudo blocker right there. But he goes ahead and plays Rocket Boots Luffy again, goes ahead and pops my Lucci, and honestly, we're not doing great right here. I will say that. I consider countering out here, but I think I just take it because I think I'm going to play Gecko and then get back a Rebecca, but I wanted to make sure I had the Rebecca in there. But I trigger into a Tempest Kick. I don't use it, obviously, because why would I? And I go ahead and play Gecko here. Gecko, like I said, gets back a value Gecko, where I get the Spandine. Spandine whiffs entirely. I feel like I never get anything else Spandine. And then I go ahead and get back a Spandine, and then the reason I get back the Spandine is I just want to build a board, and I trash one of each of the CP cards, and then I just go ahead and use Lucci. And then I don't even use Lucci's effect because I want to save enough cards in the trash for Tempest Kick, which actually, funny enough, comes up. I don't like it, so you guys will see that in a second. But because I did that, I was able to use Tempest Kick this turn when he plays the Kuzan. And if I would have used the Lucci to KO the Garps, then I would have had to do like a bunch of weird plays, and it would have just been really awkward for me. So this right here actually gave me a huge advantage. Plus he attacked into my Spandine and my I think both my Spandines, and then it put them in the trash for me to reuse them later if I had another Gecko, which is huge. Honestly, like, clearing his Garps really doesn't matter too much, in my opinion. Plus, like, the Spandines being cleared doesn't matter either because he's normally like a 7 or a 9k leader. So, like, what am I realistically going to do? So he swings 5 there. I go ahead and counter out. Like I said, I don't want to get too low when his big guys start coming out. And we're kind of nearing the end of the game right here. He plays a Kuzan, I'm pretty sure, if I remember right. And yeah, Kuzan goes ahead and pops a Lucci. I really like the Kuzan list. I think it's really interesting. If I do play Black Hill Luffy, I will play a list like this. But because you played the Kuzan, I was allowed to use my Tempest Kicks and my Sabo to develop a 9k character on the board again, which is huge. And I swing, I think, into his Garp here. I think I swing into his Garp with my leader. Yeah, after I kill that guy, obviously. And I trash a finger gun because he's probably just going to play Sabos for the rest of the game, so it's not really as important. And I swing into his Garp because I don't want to leave him at 0 life, of course, and I want to use my leader effect to get some more stuff in the trash, potentially. But once you get past, like, 13, 14, 15 cards in the trash, like, you don't need to use your leader effect too much more. Unless you're, like, digging for, like, something like Helmeppo or Spandine or Sabo, because you have Rebecca in hand that you want to get back, then, like, that's kind of, like, what you're searching for. But yeah, like I said, we are nearing the end of the game right here. This is kind of where the deck kind of thrives, is, like, you have these two big bodies, and it's, like, kind of counterintuitive for them to, like, play, like, they don't really have a lot of lines to be able to, like, kill these characters. Like, they have, like, Ice Age plus Rocket Boots, but a lot of times if you leave them at 1 life, it's really tough for them to actually be able to pull that combo off, because like they have to play like Gecko to get back Rocket Boots from the trash on top of use their leader effect, and then if they do that, they can't Ice Age. So it's just really tough for them to actually do it. They have to choose between like being a 9k leader and then like not being a 9k leader, I guess, if that makes sense. So I swing like, and this is what I was talking about, where like Brook can just like trash the Sabo, and you can swing like, you know, 2 9s or 1 13 into them, and they pretty much die. And this is the end of the game right here. So I swing 9, and then I swing another 9, and he just dies. So yeah, that's the deck, guys. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you guys on my next video. And if you guys want to check out the video on Patreon, the link's gonna be down below. Peace.